Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show, all about movies.
You're listening to the Jan Price Show, and today my guest is writer-director Sean Durkin, and we're talking about its brand new movie, The Nest, starring Jude Law and Carrie Coon. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you on the show. I have to tell you, when I got the opportunity to set up this interview with you, I was so excited because I was at Sundance this past January, and your film was the buzz of Sundance. And every time I tried to get into a screening, it was sold out. And I couldn't get in. So I was glad I had my own private screening to see this movie. So there's a lot of, thank you. Me too. And there is a lot of buzz about this movie out there. Definitely Oscar buzz is flowing out into the universe. So I'm excited to talk to you about this film. So our guests know a little bit about the synopsis of it. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what The Nest is all about?
Yeah, sure. It is set in 1986, and it is about a family that moves from New York to England, where the father of the family, Rory, played by Jude Law, has a work opportunity. And so he moves his family quite suddenly, and they get there and they move into this big house, and their life changes quite drastically. And over the course of the film, we start to learn that the reason that they moved is not quite what he said, and some of the sort of secrets within the family start to come out.
And it goes from there. Why did you... You wrote this, so why did you choose the Reagan-Thatcher era to set this movie?
Well, it started from a personal level of reflecting on my own childhood, and I lived in England in the 80s, and so it started there with that reflection. But as I was writing and making it, and I sort of honed in on some of those themes of bigger is better, ambition that was really celebrated at the time, and realizing they haven't really gone anywhere and that they're still so prevalent today. And I felt like this moment in 1986, pre-financial crash, when London was at the height of privatization and deregulation, and it felt like a marker along the way of sort of how we've got to where we got today. And so I intentionally approached the movie, though it's in the 80s. I sort of removed a lot of the signifiers that you're used to seeing in 80s movies to make it feel closer to today, because I felt like the two time periods felt very linked.
And that is what's interesting, because if you hadn't really mentioned Reaganomics, you kind of wouldn't have known which era this really is in. So that's what it's sort of timeless. You're right. It hasn't things are about the same in some ways, and haven't, which is interesting. I have to talk about the production design and the cinematography, which is absolutely gorgeous, and the way that you've decided that you chose to film this, because it does feel, and it's very unsettling, this movie, and it has lots of contrast. There's the subtle shading and the contrast with it. But for me, it felt very much like a thriller, and I was waiting any moment for something scary to happen in the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has that kind of suspense as you're watching it. So talk a little bit about that and the choices that you made to do it in that way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to make a family drama. That's what this is. That's first and foremost what it is. But then I also love genre movies. I love horror movies. And I felt like the cinematic tools that you can take from a genre movie really applied truly to the characters' journeys in this film, even though it is a drama. And so both through the production design and the cinematography, we wanted to create an atmosphere that's very similar to what you might feel in a haunted house, because the haunting is the ambition of this family. It's their miscommunications. It's their own sort of private desires. So these are the things that are haunting them and ultimately pulling them apart over the course of the film. And in terms of the cinematography approach, Matthias Erde, who is my cinematographer, he's just absolutely brilliant.
Yes, he is.
From Hungary, and he shot a film called Son of Saul, which won the Oscar for Best Foreign a few years ago, and he also he had shot my miniseries I made in England called Southcliffe, and he's just, I think he is just the absolute best, and we have a long running relationship, and so our collaboration is quite almost effortless effortless at this point because we've worked together so much that we just are very much on the same page. And so with him, it was just about creating the right light and space and feel, and we just sort of understand each other. And I think we're not afraid to, let characters step into dark shadows and stay there and not always have to be, close and not always be informational, but it's more about creating an atmosphere and creating the feel of what it's really like to be in a house like the House in the Nest. I mean, this is a 750-year-old house in the English countryside. I mean, it's a scary place and offers a lot of great, photography. And linked to that, the production designer, James Price, this is actually his first movie as a designer, which is just amazing. But he was my art director, and I sort of felt he was so talented and kind of begged him to become a designer to do this movie. And he just knew so much about English architecture and about what it was that we needed. He knew sort of what era we were looking for, what was too big, what was too small, and then the details within, just down to the floorboards and the table and the weathering of the house and the cracks and things. So just a real attention to detail that I love to work with.
Oh yes, and it just adds to the whole feel of the film, obviously.
Yeah.
all of those things. Where did you find this mansion to film in?
Yeah, so we treated it like casting. It was almost like doing an open casting call. And I think we started, we said, okay, within 3 hours of London, just because that will be useful because we're based in London. So we had a great locations team that would just go out and see everything. And then ultimately, I think we had sort of 10 finalists that I went to see with Matthias and James. And we'd get to a place and we'd be driving up and it would look perfect from the outside. And then we would get inside and there would be no open spaces. It is a really interesting thing about a lot of these houses. There's plenty of old manor houses, but they don't have open space. I think they're built probably for, to try and keep warm. There's just a series of individual rooms. And what I really needed was an open space so that we could create the isolation so that the family could be small in the frame if needed be within the house and really see through down hallways and always have open doors in the background. And so when we finally found this house. Oh, and then some of the other ones were just too big. You'd pull up and it would be a small castle and it would just be too ridiculous. And I knew you'd also lose the audience if it was too much. There had to be just that right blend. And so we found this house and it just felt like the right combination of those elements. And it was, just a really beautiful place to work.
Well, and the home is such a character in the film too. So you did film in the interiors within this home. You didn't go to a soundstage.
No, this was all on location, the whole film.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So Jude Law, whom I just adore as an actor, and Carrie Coon, who I'm not as familiar with, and I realized when I was doing my research about her that she's an actress who can really get lost in her characters, and she's not one that maybe she's so good at what she does that she may not stand out as some like as many others stand out, and actresses. I'm hoping I'm not really saying this correctly. She just becomes so much of her character that you don't.
Absolutely.
She gets lost in it, so you don't really see who she is.
Yeah.
And then when you see her in different movies, she's different in each one, so you don't always recognize who she is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. She's a proper actor.
Yes, exactly. So tell me a little bit about the casting process and how you attracted Jude Law and Carrie Coon to these roles. And they're both absolutely, they give superb performances. And I do think that they both will be on everyone's A list for acting for the Oscars. I really do.
I can't say enough about them. They are two of the best actors working today. I mean, they are, and obviously Jude is, we all know, and I just so loved the collaboration and what he was able to do with this. I mean, I sent it to him and he read it and responded and we met in in LA, and just from day one, he was asking the same questions I was, which is that, this character does makes some complicated decisions and some questionable decisions. But he's always operating from a place of truly believing that he's doing the best thing for himself and his family, even if it's not actually the best thing. And so we wanted to make sure there was that love and human belief underneath, that there was that flawed human underneath the surface. And Jude was so in touch with that from day one and unafraid to go there. And that's the thing when that was so remarkable about Jude's performance, is he was just not afraid to go to these places that Rory goes. And that's doesn't always happen, especially with someone, as well known as he is. And so, we just had such an incredible collaboration. And then with Carrie, I had actually met Carrie a couple of times. But one day my casting director just, we were early on talking about who could be. And the second that Susan Shopmaker, my casting director, said Carrie, it was clicked. It was like, of course it is. Of course it is. Like Carrie, Allison has a real duality to her. And she's multifaceted. And Carrie is an actor who can be that in such a grounded, natural way. And I think, people who know Carrie consider her one of the best, and, people who don't, it's just a matter of time before, more people do know her, because she's just, she's as good as it gets,
She really is. And you focus a lot on her in this film. There are some real interesting, the way that the scenes that were lit, particularly when she is dancing. That scene where that was so beautifully lit, and the way that was done, when she just is abandoning herself,
loose,
to the music, and that's a really wonderful scene, and the score is excellent too. You have Richard Reed Parry from Arcade Fire. How did you attract him to this? Is this the first time he's ever done a score for a movie?
Yeah, it is. I met Richard through my music supervisor, and she just put us in touch, and I listened. Richard has outside of his Arcade Fire career has done some beautiful classical recordings, and so he had a classical album called Music for Heart and Breath, which I listened to while I was writing. So music is a big part of my writing process, and so his voice in a way was always a part of this film. And then when we got into prepping the film, we reached out again and established that he would be the composer. So that was a big part of the process as well, as working with him.
Yeah, it's really, and plus putting in music from the 80s too. So that's another thing that lets you know exactly the era that you're in a little bit with the music that they're playing. And the two young actors who play the son and daughter, how did you? And I don't have their names right off the top of my head right now. But how did you find them, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so Charlie Shotwell plays Ben. He's he's about, I think, about 10 or 11 in the movie. And Charlie's a very experienced actor. We did open casting calls for the two kid roles, because I started out working in casting and spent years, being a casting assistant, watching great young actors come in and sort of, I felt like they should have been getting roles they weren't getting because they weren't famous yet. And so it's always been an important part for me to cast people and give those breaks, and trust an actor, who doesn't have the experience. But so we tried that with the Ben role, but actually what ended up happening was the opposite, was that Charlie, who was extremely experienced, just came in and just had the right energy. And he's just such an incredible kid, and so smart and so interesting. And Ben is a very quiet role. And so I felt like all of that stuff that's working in Charlie's brain would be quite interesting when it was, sort of a bit more behind the scenes in the movie. But Una Roach, who plays Sam, was very much a result of open casting, and she had never done a movie before. I think she just recently graduated from theater school, and so again, we did open casting, and she came, and someone Susan Shotmaker knew, and she brought in, and just immediately I could feel from her the strength and humor that I envisioned Sam having, and she just had it right away. So it was an easy choice.
Yeah, there's great chemistry, and they were really wonderful in this film. What was the most difficult part of the shoot for you?
Honestly, it was such a fluid, warm shoot. I mean, it was. There was a great chemistry. It's obviously a serious drama, but the set itself is just like so relaxed and fun. And I don't think I've ever had such a harmonious experience. So, I guess it was a long shoot. I mean, not a ton of days in comparison to other movies, but it stretched out over a few months. And so, that's always a challenge. And there's always the usual challenges of, finding the locations and finding the right great actors to slot into some of those smaller roles. That's always, a tricky prospect, just because I just want to have the best people in every part. And so, but we got there with everything. So, it was a really, really special experience all around.
You also work, they always say, don't work with children and animals in movies, but you, and you decided to tackle both in this film. Let's talk about the horse in this.
Yeah. They made it easy for me. I worked with the most incredible trainers. The horse, actually, Allison's horse is Jon Snow's horse from Game of Thrones.
Oh, really?
His name is Tornado, and he's a fantastic actor. And so I was working with such top level horse trainers called the Devil's Horsemen in England, and they just make it so easy. And I lean on them. I mean, I had personal experiences. I've been around horses my life and worked in farms, and so I knew enough, but I leaned on them to I wanted every detail to be exactly right. And Carrie worked really hard to learn how to ride, and it was and they definitely made it easy for me.
I was going to ask you about that, because Carrie, her role revolves around this horse. So a lot of it, not only her husband, but the horse is very significant to the film. And I was wondering, and I thought, wow, they had to find an actress who, really is a great rider and able to be with, handle the horse beautifully. And so she did not know how to ride prior to the film then. No. Wow.
She had some, some very basic like childhood experience with horses. So she was comfortable around them and could get on a horse. But she really learned how to ride for the part.
Yeah, so she's excellent.
And also learned how to teach to ride. Because that's a whole specific thing in itself is being a riding teacher and knowing the language. And that also came a lot from her, the trainer that she had in we shot the first part of the film in Toronto and had a great horse trainer there as well, who Carrie absorbed some things from her own lessons that she put into that. So that was fun.
I did see that some of it was filmed in Toronto, but I was curious as to what parts were.
Yeah, so basically the first part of the film is set in America, and it's set in sort of Westchester County in New York, but we ended up shooting it in an area just outside of Toronto. So the first part, when the first house they're in, and then the kids' schools, and so those first scenes, basically everything that in the movie that's in America was actually here, in Toronto, and then everything in England is actually in England.
So let's talk about the symbolism of the horse, because the horse is a significant part of this film. For you, what is the significance and the symbolism of the horse?
Well, it's funny because in the end, I think when you walk away from watching the film, the horse feels sort of like the biggest metaphor of the film. Yet it's a very specific personal detail from my life. So it's funny how that happens. And I don't want to, spoil the movie, so I'll leave it out.
Right.
But a couple of the things that happened with the horse were things that I experienced as a child from working on farms. So it's funny how that specific detail ends up feeling so metaphorical, but at the same time, I guess it is in the end quite a metaphor. And I think at the core, the horse to me represents sort of the different view of Rory and Allison, which is that to people who work with horses, I think sometimes there's a misconception that, working with horses is some sort of like fancy job or some sort of like fancy existence, when actually, horse people are very much of the earth and hardworking, and it is physical labor, and it's an emotional connection to the animal and a silent connection to the animal. It's very spiritual almost in that relationship, and that's what it means to Allison. And to Rory, it's his relationship to a horse is something that is often a misconception of horses, which is a status symbol, as something to say like, oh, we have horses, and so it represented that divide for me, I think, in the end. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Because you can interpret it a number of different ways. And that's what's so great about the film in that respect, that you can put your own obviously everybody puts their own interpretation on it, but certainly the interpretation of the horse. All right. So what was it like directing Jude Law, who's been around for so long and has done has just a magnificent body of work? You talked about meeting him, but what was it really like? Were you intimidated by directing him and meeting him and having him be a part of this film?
No, not at all. Not at all. I love Jude's work, and I was so excited that he responded to the script, and it was just the most wonderful collaboration. I mean, he was all in every way. The movie meant so much to him, and he just gave everything he had to it. And it was just such a beautiful collaboration. We just immediately, I think we're both very, very open and honest and kind of, quite just, we both just like let it all out. And I think that's where you get the best work, is to dig deep personally and find those connections. And he's just, I just couldn't say more good things about that collaboration.
Yeah. Well, it's a very nuanced role, performance, and that's and so is Carrie's too. So they actually blend beautifully. I mean, in the way that their characters, the way they both, were to perform together in the film. The other part of it is that. You must have created an atmosphere on the set for that collaboration to feel safe for people to go deeply and emotionally as they did in this film, and that's really a credit to you as the director.
Thank you. Yeah, I really believe in creating a platform for actors to do their best work by creating a safe space where they are going to give everything they have, and they know they can be a bit messy, and they know they can sort of go too far or not give enough. And they know that I'm going to take care of that in the edit and make choices that protect their performance. And I think, everyone has to have the space to just try something knowing it might not work. And that's where trust becomes so important. And I think how great work is made.
Well, you did a wonderful job with this film. I wish you much success.
I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Where can people see this movie?
So it is available on digital platforms November 17th.
Fabulous. So everybody seek out The Nest, starring Jude Law and Carrie Coon. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sean.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You can listen to The Jan Price Show whenever, wherever at thejanpriceshow.com or on the iHeart Podcast Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, anywhere you get your favorite podcast. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and like The Jan Price Show on Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show, all about movies.